It's all your fault for having a wedding with a woman like that when I'm around. I didn't like it, so I just ruined it. I woke up in the hospital I was taken to, hearing my husband and best friend talking. I remember, in the middle of my long-awaited wedding, everything suddenly went black. As I continued to listen to their conversation, they started discussing something shocking. Sleeping pills. It turned out they were having an affair, and my best friend had added sleeping pills to my meal to sabotage the wedding. Knowing the truth, I decided to take revenge on them in my dazed state. My name is Michelle. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my husband Tom and our son Michael. I've always had a complex about one thing. That we never had a wedding. 3 years ago, while I was pregnant with our child, Tom, who I was dating at the time, said, "The order is a bit reversed, but..." and proposed to me. I was over the moon about both the pregnancy and the proposal. However, my parents were strongly opposed. Even during the family gatherings, both families maintained their opposition. A shotgun wedding is out of the question. In response to my parents saying that, Tom's parents always seemed apologetic. And they assured me, no matter what decision you make, we'll make sure to take responsibility. Having an abortion wasn't an option for me, so I went against my parents' wishes and married Tom. At that time, we wanted a wedding but decided against it, considering the childbirth expenses. Now, almost 3 years after our son's birth, we still haven't had a wedding. It always bothered me. To someone like me, my husband finally said, "Let's have a wedding on Christmas." The reason being, I was gonna return to work at a hotel next spring, and our son was gonna start attending daycare. Knowing we'd be busier then, my husband felt we should have the wedding before that. Of course, I immediately agreed. I was so happy. Especially since my husband had been going out more often recently for drinks or other events, and I had started wondering, does he find it boring to be with me, or have I gone from being his lover and wife to just a mom? But it seems those worries were unfounded. The complex I had felt for so long vanished, and the recent concerns about Tom also seemed resolved. Looking back, I realize I was on cloud 9. The day after my husband's suggestion, I began planning the guest list. I have 4 close friends. I've been friends with them since high school, and even through college and starting our careers, we've remained tight-knit. Laura is a hardworking lawyer, Nancy is a working mom of 4-year-old twins, Rachel is currently expecting, and Isabel works at the same company as her husband. Though each of us is in a different stage in life, we regularly meet up for meals and trips, always staying in touch. I wanted to hand out wedding invitations to these 4 besties in person, so I decided to organize a lunch gathering. Congrats on the wedding. That sounds weird, right? Happy wedding, Michelle. Thanks for the invite. Rachel, the pregnant one, exclaimed. Thanks. Tom was like, let's have a wedding. I was so happy. But Rachel, make sure you don't overdo it, okay? You gotta take care of yourself. I said, only to be interrupted by Nancy, a mother of 2. No worries. I was working full-time when I was in her shoes. A wedding is a piece of cake. I had a tough time even with just 1 kid. Everyone's different, so really Rachel, don't push yourself. While we were discussing, Laura, the lawyer, playfully pinched my right shoulder. Hey! Don't flaunt your happiness like that. It's hard for Isabel and me to join the conversation. Right, Isabel? Isabel, looking a bit distracted, responded, huh? Oh, yeah. Seriously, don't show off. I observed Isabel and felt something was off. She seemed less lively than usual. Isabel was usually the lively one, often considered the cute youngest of our group of 4. So, her being unusually silent was definitely off. I wondered if the topics we were discussing were unsettling for Isabel, who was still single, or if they were subjects she'd rather we not touch upon. I chose not to delve deeper into it. On the day of my wedding, I was so excited I felt like I could fly. My husband and son were both dressed in matching tuxedos, and I finally got the chapel wedding I'd always dreamed of. My parents, who had initially opposed the marriage, finally seemed to accept and acknowledge us. They were all smiles at us, the newlyweds. I was worried about Rachel, who was pregnant, and Isabel, who seemed a bit down, but I was overjoyed to have all four of my dearest friends present with me. It was a truly, truly happy and wonderful wedding. I had planned so many special things for the reception afterwards. I was sure it would be a great time. I had no inkling of anything amiss. For the reception meal, we had prepared a French full course. I'd often heard brides say they were too nervous to eat much at their reception, but having been married for 3 years already, I was calm and collected. While enjoying the delicious French cuisine, I was comforted watching my son, seated between my husband and me, happily munching on his kid's meal. My son had been such a good boy, sitting quietly. We had promised him that if he got fussy, we'd take him to sit with his grandparents. He looked so adorable behaving like that. The reception went on without a hitch. Greetings from my husband's boss and colleagues I had worked closely with. A slideshow our friends had made showcasing our family's memories. There were tears and laughter. It truly was a great time. We went for a wardrobe change. My son had drawn patterns on our pristine white dress and suit with fabric crayons. All three of us matched. For the candlelight service and photo session, I had always known I wanted to wear this dress. After the candlelight service, I took photos with family, relatives, and friends. Everyone complimented my dress, which made me so happy. I caught a glimpse of my husband chatting with Isabel. They knew each other, so there was nothing unusual about it. You see, around the time my husband and I got legally married, Isabel was struggling with workplace harassment at her former job. So, she consulted my husband, who worked in HR, and he spoke on her behalf to his company, leading Isabel to transfer there. Since then, it seemed that Isabel often sought job advice from my husband. Considering I worked in a hotel, I figured my husband, being in the same workplace, would be better equipped to counsel her, so I too asked him to look out for Isabel. My husband appeared to be genuinely concerned, regularly assisting her since then. So, even when I saw Isabel laughing and taking pictures with my husband, I didn't think much of it. Things took a turn right before I was about to read a letter of gratitude to my parents. It happened while I was listening to a guest's speech. All of a sudden, my vision blurred, and everything in front of me seemed to shake. Up until that point, I felt perfectly fine, but all at once, my sight got fuzzy, and my thoughts became jumbled. I've got to hold it together. Even though that's what I thought, maintaining my seated posture became challenging. I'm gonna fall! By the time that thought crossed my mind, I was already on the floor. Michelle! What happened? I could faintly hear the alarmed voices of those around me. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance," but I wanted to tell them, "No, I'm fine." Yet, I couldn't muster the strength to speak. My husband cradled me, constantly reassuring, "It's okay, it's gonna be all right, Michelle. It's just a sleeping pill, don't you worry. You'll be fine in a jiffy." Sleeping pill? What did he mean by that? I tried to figure it out, but I couldn't, and without understanding what he meant, I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was in a hospital. Beside me, my husband was holding my hand. Once he realized I was awake, he immediately called for the doctor. The doctor's diagnosis? An overdose of sleeping pills. "Do you recall taking anything?" the doctor asked. Of course, I had no such recollection. My husband seemed just as clueless, and we both shook our heads. The police wanted to get involved, considering the possibility of foul play. I told the police I had no memory of the event and had never taken sleeping pills. My husband stated, "We have no clue. Many people were around our food, so it's hard to say who might be suspicious. Heck, it might even be one of the hotel staff for all we know." I remembered me husband telling me, "It's just a sleeping pill, you'll be all right," before I blacked out, which made his statement seem odd to me. In the end, with neither of us having any leads, the culprit remained unidentified. The police said they'd continue their investigation and left. It was decided I should stay in the hospital for a couple of days just to be safe, and our son would be looked after by my parents. Relatives and friends rushed to the hospital for support. Once I was awake, and after the police finished their inquiries, they left. Left alone in the room, I was in a daze for a while. But after some time, feeling thirsty, I decided to drag my stand and head to the hospital shop to grab a drink. Then, in the hallway on the second floor near the store, I spotted my husband and Isabel together. "What's going on?" I thought as I approached. I couldn't believe my ears when I overheard their conversation. "There was no need to go that far. It wasn't a lethal dose, so it's fine. It's your fault for having a wedding with that woman when I'm around. I just ruined it because I didn't like it," Isabel said that, wrapping her arm around my husband. I couldn't process what was happening. What's their relationship? Are they just colleagues? What did she mean by lethal dose? I knew I couldn't get caught listening, so I hid behind a pillar in the hallway to overhear their conversation. My husband caressed Isabel's head, saying, "I'm real sorry. You're the only one that matters to me. I had a feeling Michelle was getting suspicious lately, so I just put on a show with that wedding. I explained it to you, didn't I? I don't want to be taken for a ride with ridiculous child support. It's just till we don't have to spend on Laura anymore. You know?" Isabel, narrowing her eyes at her husband, said in a coquettish voice, "You promised, remember?" Hearing that, even I could tell what kind of relationship my husband and Isabel had. They were having an affair. Deceiving me, keeping our marriage intact, all while continuing their illicit relationship. A marriage of convenience just for the sake of it. Moreover, Isabel, who wasn't satisfied with even that ceremony, drugged it to ruin it. I've been betrayed by my husband and Isabel, the two most important people, all this time. After that, tears wouldn't stop flowing. I couldn't bear to watch my husband and Isabel getting all lovey-dovey anymore. I gave up going to the hospital store, returned to my room, and pulled the sheets over my head. My emotions were all over the place, but oddly enough, my mind was clear. The more I thought about it, the more unforgivable what my husband and Isabel did became. I was filled with regret and sadness. "You should rest up." Even though the doctor told me that, I was wide awake and couldn't sleep. I cried all night, and as the sun rose, I was determined to get my revenge on the two of them. 24 hours ago, the love I thought I had for my husband, whom I believed I loved so much, had vanished. And the friendship I valued so much with Isabel had disappeared without a trace. With that resolve, I was plotting my revenge against the two. Unaware of this, my husband came to visit me first thing in the morning and tried to strike up various conversations. Honestly, it was nothing but stressful. "I'm still feeling a bit out of it, so I'm gonna sleep." Saying that, I pulled the covers over and pretended to sleep, all the while lost in thought. I want to take everything away from those two. From my husband, I want to take away our home, his job, and all his money. From Isabel, I want to take away her job, her friends, and my husband. Now, what should I do to achieve that? I couldn't come to a conclusion on my own. However, for now, I needed proof of my husband's and Isabel's affair. I knew that much was necessary. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Desiring swift revenge on the two of them, the very next day, I headed to a private investigator's office to gather evidence of Tom and Isabel's affair, and to find out whether Isabel had been prescribed sleeping pills. I had 2 requests. After that, I contacted Laura, who's a lawyer. Even though she was surprised when I told her we needed to talk right after my discharge, Laura made time for me. The meeting place? Laura's law office. "Wanna go to a cafe or a restaurant?" I replied to her kind offer. "I'd like to talk somewhere private." So, it was decided to meet at the law firm where Laura worked. In the long run, I had thought of officially hiring her as my attorney, so this might have been for the best. I immediately told Laura everything I had seen that day at the hospital. Laura was visibly shocked, but after some thought, she said, Come to think of it, Isabel was always praising Tom a lot. Then she added, if it's true that Isabel had an affair with Tom and she's behind the incident, that's despicable. I'd like to think of Isabel as my close friend too, so I really don't want to believe this. However, I'll help you gather all the evidence thoroughly. If we don't find any, we'll pretend this conversation never happened. But if we do, I'll be fully on your side, Michelle. I could understand Laura's disbelief. I'd probably have a hard time believing it if I were in Laura's shoes too. For a while, under Laura's guidance, I tried to gather evidence without letting husband catch on. However, the results weren't great. His phone was securely locked and he always had it with him. He also seemed cautious, as the number of times he went out drinking had decreased. The private detective I hired had the same results. There were pictures of him and Isabel eating together, traveling in a car, but none of them provided solid evidence of an affair. The only progress was with the sleeping pills. I found out that Isabel, who had been bullied at work 3 years ago, had been prescribed them by a doctor, and I learned the type of drug she'd been given. I didn't know what type of sleeping pill I had been given, so I stored this information as evidence to eventually submit to the police. Then, I told Laura about the only evidence I found, which was the medicine. Laura suggested, what if Michelle pretends to be away from home? Maybe Tom will let his guard down? No way. He'd never do that, I laughed, but Laura was serious. I laughed, but Laura was dead serious. You know, I've handled quite a few divorce cases, and it's surprisingly common. Spouses doing things at home when the other's away. I think it's worth giving it a shot. So, I decided to give it a try. The timing was mid-February. Right around Valentine's Day. I want to take our son and visit my parents out in Nebraska before I start working in March, I told him. When I said that, Tom responded, sounds great. Go ahead, and he was supportive. I told him I'd be gone for a week, leaving on a Thursday and coming back the following Wednesday. In reality, the plan was to stay in Nebraska for a couple of nights, show Tom pictures and video calls of us there to reassure him, and then see if anything happened over the weekend. It was all Laura's idea. She also suggested setting up hidden cameras at 3 points in the house: the entrance, living room, and bedroom. This was also Laura's idea, and the camera was something she borrowed from an acquaintance of hers. As planned, I sent Tom pictures of my son and me in Nebraska and made video calls to him. He genuinely seemed happy to see us having a good time. Maybe I had misunderstood what happened at the hospital. I couldn't see any signs of abnormal behavior from husband. But the next day shattered that notion. I checked the surveillance cameras I had set up. First thing in the morning, Tom had turned off the pet camera we use for our son or covered it with cloth. My husband was clearly acting strange. And then, at 7 p.m. It wasn't just husband who came home from work. He brought Isabel with him. Today's Friday. It must have been perfect for the two of them, having the next day off. Maybe Isabel will stay over the entire weekend. I quickly contacted Laura. So, Isabel's the one he's cheating with, huh? After Laura sounded disappointed, she said, come back here tomorrow. We're gonna get revenge on those two. She said that to me. All this time, on the surveillance footage, husband and Isabel were getting all cozy. I stared at the screen, mulling over the revenge plan Laura and I had devised. The next day, I had to go back home after being called into work. I told my parents and had them look after my son. I was hesitant to tell them the truth, but I knew if I did, my dad would say, hold on. I'm coming too. I could already picture him causing a scene, so I held back. Returning to New York, I visited Laura's office. Laura greeted me with a worried look. Michelle, are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. Sure, I was shocked for a moment when I saw it yesterday. But I've no love or affection left. I just want to break things off ASAP. Besides, knowing I'll have evidence makes me kinda excited. When I responded like that, Laura looked somewhat relieved. Then, the two of us reviewed the surveillance footage to finalize our plan. Once we confirmed that my husband and Isabel had left the house, we would break in. We had already secured some space for Laura and me in the bedroom closet, so we'd hide there. We'd monitor the surveillance footage, wait for my husband and Isabel to come home, and make our move when they showed evidence. During that, I would snap photos with my smartphone. Laura would record a video. However, my cautious husband didn't seem to want to leave the house at all. Isabel tried persuading him several times, saying, "Come on, let's go out. Let's have a date." But he declined every time. Watching with impatience, they finally left in the car to get groceries for dinner. As soon as Laura and I confirmed that, we executed our plan. We quickly went back to the house and successfully hid in the closet. After waiting for about an hour, my husband and Isabel returned, holding hands. It seemed like Isabel was gonna cook dinner, wearing an apron, but it was evident she had nothing on underneath. Seeing Isabel like that, my husband, seemingly overwhelmed by passion, pushed her onto the couch and started to make a move. We exchanged glances and nodded, then left the closet and approached the two of them. The first to notice me was my husband, who had been holding Isabel from behind. Our eyes met, and my husband froze for about 5 seconds, then turned pale, and immediately let go of Isabel. "Why'd you stop?" Isabel said in a playful voice, lifting her head, and she froze too. She said to the two of them, "I knew you two were in that kind of relationship. I wanted proof but couldn't get any. That's why I made up the story about going back home. Now I can get a divorce." "When did you find out?" my husband asked, his voice trembling. "I overheard you two at the hospital. So, I knew you both drugged me." "Wait a minute, that's not true. I didn't drug her. It was Isabel who did it on her own." As expected, my husband spilled the beans about the drug. I grinned. "Did you get it, Laura?" "Got it perfectly." With that, Laura entered the living room. "Why the heck is Laura here?" The first to react was Isabel. "Michelle hired me. I didn't want to believe that Isabel was cheating and drugging drinks, so I was helping her gather evidence to prove it wrong. But I was shocked to see that it was actually true on the video." "What do you mean by request?" Tom, having met Laura a few times and knowing her profession, asked anxiously. "Tom, what you did counts as infidelity. Michelle has the right to divorce you and claim alimony." "Whoa! Hold on. It's not like that. It was just a fling with Isabel. Please don't get the wrong idea." Laura's words shook him, and the husband quickly denied them. "Wait a minute. A fling? You told me once our kid grows up, you were gonna divorce Michelle, didn't you? Was that a lie?" "Of course it was. Who the hell would choose someone like you over their family?" Isabel was lost for words at husband's harsh statement. Seeing Isabel's reaction, Laura decided to pile on more. "I'm sorry to say this when you're upset, Isabel, but we also got testimony that you drugged Michelle's drink. So what? You can be charged with crime of injury. The police will be here any minute now." "What?" Laura was speechless. She seemed too shocked to say anything. "Wait. Stop it. It was just a joke, right? Tom, help me out here." Isabel cried out to my husband for help. Tom ignored Isabel's pleas. Laura said to him, "If you knew that Isabel was mixing in sleeping pills, there's a chance you could be considered an accomplice." "Why me? She did that on her own." Afterwards, when the police arrived and were shown the footage we had taken earlier, both Isabel and husband were taken to the station for questioning. Additionally, when I mentioned the information I'd obtained from a private investigator about her being prescribed sleeping pills, they responded, "We'll thoroughly investigate that matter as well." I was told that. After Tom and Isabel were taken away, I booked a hotel room and toasted with Laura. I didn't want to spend another second in that house. And for the final touch at the hotel, I sent videos of the affair and the testimony about the sleeping pills to the company where Tom and Isabel worked. The effect was immediate. A week later, husband was questioned at the police station. Fortunately, he wasn't charged, but he did lose his job. After the company saw the 2 videos and confirmed the facts, several testimonies came forward about the 2 acting suspiciously at work. As a result, my husband was forced into voluntary retirement. Everything went according to mine and Laura's plan. Around that time, I began discussions about divorcing my husband. My husband came alone to Laura's office. "Didn't you hire a lawyer?" He replied, "I asked a friend, but they turned me down because they said the odds were overwhelmingly against me." Then, after taking a deep breath, he began to plead. "That's not why I came today. I came to ask Michelle for forgiveness. Please. I'll pay alimony or whatever it takes, just don't divorce me." Saying this, my husband got on his knees and begged. I was unmoved by his pleas. Why would anyone want to get back with a man who cheated and is now unemployed? At least, I don't. "Let's get a divorce." "No. I'll never do it again. Please reconsider. And Tom Jr. needs his father, right?" I was disgusted that he would bring up our son at this point. "We don't need a jobless father who's been unfaithful. Even without you, I'm confident I can raise our child without any hardship." Despite what I said, my husband tried to continue with his excuses and begging. Laura interrupted him. "This isn't going anywhere. Should we bring this to mediation? Tom, you're clearly at a disadvantage. The legal fees will just deplete your savings. For us, as long as we get the divorce, it doesn't matter how. But for you, it'll just be like throwing your money away." Tom held his head in his hands and let out a scream. After pondering for a good 5 minutes, my husband finally said, "Give me some time to think," he said in a strained voice, and then left the office. Seeing his state, Laura and I couldn't contain our laughter and burst out laughing. 2 weeks later, Tom messaged me agreeing to the divorce and we decided to meet again. The location was once again Laura's office. My husband who came looked extremely worn out. It seemed like he had given up this time, as he unemotionally accepted all the terms Laura proposed. In the end, he would pay a compensation of $15,000, monthly child support of $400, and I'd also get half of my husband's severance pay. We settled on the agreement with no division of assets for my husband. However, he seemed unable to find a new job and begged, "Can I make the compensation payments in installments?" Without any division of assets, the only money he had was his severance pay. Being jobless, he probably had no choice but to use that for living expenses. Reluctantly, I agreed to let him pay in installments by increasing the compensation to $16,000 as interest. And so, we got divorced without a hitch. I managed to get the money as planned and rendered my husband jobless. I believe I took everything from my husband, family, job, and money. Next is Isabel. 4 days after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Isabel's lawyer, asking to settle the matter of the wedding out of court. Just like always, we decided to discuss it at Laura's office. As soon as Isabel entered the office, she pleaded, kneeling down, "Please forgive me. I'll pay any amount of compensation." Recalling my husband groveling in Laura's office, I had to chuckle, "Not gonna happen." That's what I replied. "Why? Aren't we friends?" "I'm hurt." The look on Isabel's face made me angry. "Who had an affair with a friend's husband and then drugged me? It was you who betrayed me first, wasn't it, Isabel? I don't consider you a friend anymore." "That's harsh. The sleeping pills weren't a big deal, and I broke up with Tom, didn't I?" Isabel shouted back. "So what? I'm still hurt. Besides, if you want Tom, he's all yours." As I said this, Isabel seemed a bit pleased. "But just so you know, he's unemployed. He quit his job after the affair with you got out. Now he's jobless and can't even pay me alimony. If you're okay with such a man, go ahead. I guess you're content with my leftovers, I said with a smug face. Suddenly, Isabel shrieked and lunged at me. Quickly, her lawyer stepped in to intervene. That was attempted injury, right? Laura remarked, causing the lawyer's expression to darken. As for the wedding issue, feel free to sue. But please let this one slide, the lawyer pleaded. Laura asked me, Michelle, are you okay with this? When I nodded in agreement, Laura said, all right, we'll drop the settlement. We'll proceed with suing Isabel.
No way! Laura, that's too harsh. I never did anything to you.
I'm not your friend. Nancy and Rachel, after hearing about this, were disgusted with you. Don't you think you're out of friends? When Laura said this, Isabel began crying hysterically. That's so unfair. What did I even do? Probably fearing another assault, Isabel was practically dragged out of the office by her lawyer. Laura and I burst into laughter. No matter what you did, it wasn't an affair and an injury case.
Well, which one is worse?
But with this, I successfully took away Isabel's job, friends, and husband. I felt very satisfied. It's been 6 months since then. In the end, since we didn't settle out of court, Isabel was arrested for causing injury. Isabel's parents apparently heard about the arrest from Laura and her friends, and they came to apologize with compensation. According to her parents, she won't likely get probation because she's been denying and showing a bad attitude. We've tried talking to her, but she seems to have given up and won't listen. On the other hand, her ex-husband seems to be struggling just to pay the compensation. He apparently hasn't been able to find a full-time job yet and is working a construction-related part-time job during the day. At night, he's juggling a job in the cleaning industry, desperately trying to cover alimony, child support, and his own living expenses. I'd be in a bit of a bind if the money stopped coming in, so I hope he doesn't work himself to the ground. As planned, I returned to the hotel job. I've been leaving my son in daycare, so I feel bad he might be lonely, but I make sure to spend all my off days playing with him. With the money I got from my ex-husband, I can easily make a down payment on a condo, so I'm also house hunting. Once things settle down at the hotel, I'm gonna pay the down payment and buy it. My current life, with work and time with my son, is much more fulfilling and fun than when I was a stay-at-home mom living with my ex. Moving forward, I want to cherish this life and hope to someday meet someone great. I'm not exactly pretty-faced, and to be blunt, I'm overweight. Yet, despite this, a man married me, a man I genuinely loved. Now that I'm pregnant, he told me, I hate poor people like you. I'm gonna divorce you, a fat and ugly woman like you. Raise the child in your belly on your own. I can't believe he said such hurtful things to me. I wonder how he could say that to me. My name is Catherine. Growing up, I was never the center of attention, always in the quieter groups. To be honest, I've always been on the heavier side, and I'm well aware I don't have a traditionally cute face. So, I never really had admirers. But, surprisingly, I was quite athletic in school and was one of the top performers during PE. The female gym teacher would often compliment me, saying, Catherine, you're so flexible and healthy. Your skin even glows more than anyone else's. I suppose being top-notch in PE was the only area where I could shine. And having a gym teacher notice that made me incredibly happy. After high school, I chose to attend a beauty and health vocational school. I genuinely enjoyed learning about makeup techniques, body mechanics, and how to maintain good posture. I was among the top students. And I felt this was my calling. Eventually, I found a job at a spa that offered massages. It wasn't a big company, and the pay wasn't great. But I felt a sense of purpose, and many clients requested me. The spa wasn't exclusively for women, men could also get oil massages and relaxation massages. One of the male clients was Bob. Bob once said, after one of my massages, You're really good. I don't think I can get a massage from anyone but you. He praised me a lot. He even advised, Why not spread your skills more?
You're that good.
It felt great to be complimented on something I'm confident in, so I naturally developed feelings for him. I mean, anyone can do what I do. But yeah, I trained all the staff here. I replied modestly, but deep down, I was falling for Bob. Perhaps he sensed my feelings, because he eventually asked me out. Bob knew many trendy places, and he was fun to talk to. Being with him always lifted my spirits, and I started thinking of marriage. And maybe he sensed that too, because he proposed, and we got married. It felt like the peak of my life. I mean, I never stood out in school, wasn't particularly pretty, and was overweight. Because of that, I never experienced being popular or sought after. Yet, I was able to marry such a wonderful man. We rented a small apartment and began our life as a married couple. I imagined a future filled with endless smiles and happiness. I would even daydream to that extent. But those hopes were too idealistic. The times of such joyful smiles didn't last very long. My sister became the source of trouble in our marriage. Yes, I have an older sister named Rachel. Rachel was the opposite of me, pretty and with a great figure. She was always popular with the boys in school, and she's dated so many that I doubt she can even keep track. But to be honest, I never really liked Rachel. She always looked down on me because of our contrasting appearances.
Catherine, look at this dress. Isn't it cute? You should try wearing something like this. Oh, but I doubt it'd fit you. The dress would probably feel so sorry.
She teased, laughing. Another time, she said, "Oh my, someone confessed their feelings to me again, even though I told them I have a boyfriend. I must be super attractive. Catherine, you're lucky, you probably don't have such problems, right?" She would often make these annoying remarks. But I couldn't retort because Rachel wasn't wrong. I'd always hoped to avoid her as much as possible since she was always like this. But suddenly, Rachel started visiting the apartment where Bob and I lived. It was right around the time when I found out I was pregnant. Unexpectedly, Rachel said with sincerity,
"Catherine, you're pregnant? Congratulations."
Hearing that, I was a bit shocked. Maybe her perspective changed since I got married. My feelings of surprise turned to joy. However, I felt a bit off shortly after. After looking around our place, she asked, "Is Bob not home today?" I thoughtlessly told her he was at work, but she kept talking about him. "So, what's Bob like? Does he get weekends off? Where do you guys usually go for dates?" I was bombarded with questions. I felt she spent more time talking about that than my pregnancy. It started to bring back all the negative feelings I had about her, but she just asked her questions and then left. The short interaction left me feeling drained. But after that, almost every weekend, Rachel started coming over. Bob was home on weekends, and initially, Rachel was all smiles and greeted him.
"Bob, you're gonna be a dad soon. Congratulations."
But, as her visits became frequent, she began to focus her attention solely on Bob, barely acknowledging me. Moreover, she started showing up in stylish clothes she usually wouldn't wear. I've never been much of a catch, but after all, I'm still a woman. I could see through Rachel's intentions. She was definitely coming to see Bob. It was evident from the way her voice and expressions became more feminine around him. Despite my growing discomfort, the bond between them seemed to be strengthening. I had always believed that Bob wouldn't fall for someone like Rachel, especially now that he's my husband. But as time passed, I began to feel an unsettling atmosphere, like my trust in him was being eroded. While Rachel and Bob's relationship appeared to grow closer, Bob's attitude towards me seemed to be cooling. Usually, when he'd come home from work, he'd say with a bright voice,
"I'm home. I've had a long day and can't wait to eat your cooking."
And during dinner, he'd praise,
"This is so delicious. I'm so lucky to eat your cooking every day."
However, a few weeks after Rachel started visiting, those kind words vanished. Instead of his usual demeanor, when Bob came home from work, he'd sigh and grumble. "Man, today was exhausting.
Why on earth does the boss talk so darn long?
And during dinner, he started to complain.
I really wanted to eat some meat today. This isn't filling at all.
I felt increasingly lonely and finally confronted Bob.
Hey!
Have you been irritated lately? Why does every day seem so miserable to you? To my surprise, Bob shot me an angry glare. Something I hadn't seen even when we were dating.
What? I don't want to hear that from you. You don't understand anything. After all, you just work some slow-paced job and earn peanuts.
His words felt harsh, almost like verbal abuse. I was deeply hurt, on the verge of tears. I never wanted to fight, but I couldn't stay silent either. I don't work slowly, and my salary isn't that low. Before I could say more, Bob cut me off.
That's enough. I'm gonna take a bath and then hit the hay.
And with that, he headed straight to the bathroom. From then on, Bob often came home late and was constantly on his phone when he was home. I had a growing sense of unease. Especially since I was nearly 7 months pregnant. I didn't want to think negatively, but there were things I couldn't help but wonder about. One day, I gently prodded.
Rachel hasn't been around lately, has she?
Indeed. Rachel, who used to visit almost weekly, had suddenly stopped coming. However, Bob nonchalantly replied. Who knows? Rachel lives in the next town over. If we wanted to see her, we could any time. This response alarmed me. I had never mentioned that Rachel lived in the neighboring town. Moreover, Rachel had just moved there barely a month ago. By that time, she had already stopped coming to our apartment. Unable to contain my suspicions any longer, I blurted out.
How do you know Rachel lives in the next town? Are you hiding something with her? It sure seems like it.
I finally blurted it out clearly. It was clear how much Bob meant to me, which is why I expressed myself so emotionally. I expressed my feelings so strongly just because I wanted to convey how I felt. But Bob seemed indifferent. Instead, he smirked and said, all right, I get it. If you're gonna be this way, we should just break up. Honestly, I'm not into women who've put on weight like you. And with your low earnings, life ain't fun. I don't like being poor. Divorce might be our only option. I was overwhelmed with shock, anger, and sadness. Especially with our baby on the way.
That's so cruel. What about our child?
In rapid succession, he retorted.
Raise the kid by yourself. I'm not gonna be that child's father anymore. Look, I like beautiful women with great figures like Rachel. I've decided to marry Rachel once I divorce you. So, you're useless to me now. I married you because you were good at massages and seemed like you'd handle the housework, but I'm over it.
He was just going off. I couldn't even get a word in. But being told such blunt truths made me change my feelings instantly. There's no point being with this man anymore. Actually, I realized I didn't want to be. Surely, Bob and Rachel had something going on. With my feelings completely cooled, I told him. All right, let's break up then. Take care. Then, I handed him the business card of the divorce attorney I had prepared, foreseeing this situation.
Wow, you're quick. I can divorce you right away with this. Once it's finalized, I might just head over to Rachel's place. You can keep living your broke life.
Bob was all excited as he took the business card, but if he truly planned on marrying Rachel, that excitement would probably fade pretty quickly, wouldn't it? But he didn't seem to realize that yet. So, I immediately started preparing to move out. I quickly secured a new place and decided to live there for a while. My belly was starting to show, and I was thinking of taking a break from work. About a month after I left our home, my phone rang one day. It was Bob. Even if I didn't answer, I knew what he wanted. Still, I picked up to settle things. His voice was frantic.
Hey, where are you? Do something, come on.
I calmly responded. I'm in one of the new luxury condos. It's spacious, has a great view, it's perfect. There was a pause from Bob.
What? How can someone broke like you afford such a place?
He'd probably think that way, wouldn't he? After all, he just assumed I was broke without knowing the whole story. But to be clear. Why? Because I have around $700,000 in savings. And my monthly income is around $50,000. He probably wouldn't believe it, but it was true. What I mean is, sure, the income from treatments at that workplace alone might not have been that much. However, the truth is, I was actually allowed to have a side job within that workplace. I taught remote massage classes online. At the workplace, I became an instructor, teaching beauty and health courses, including massage techniques. Initially, the spa owner appreciated my skills and knowledge, suggesting I try it. The staff at the same workplace also acknowledged that they improved faster thanks to my teachings. However, in the beginning, there wasn't much in terms of results. It was probably like that when I first started dating Bob too. Things changed, and now I have about 2,000 students nationwide. With a $50 membership fee, I made $100,000 monthly. I got half of it, so my share was really $50,000. When I told Bob this, he shouted,
"Why didn't you tell me sooner? We wouldn't have divorced. And we could have lived in a better house."
Too little, too late. He had always seen me as just a housemaid good for chores and massages. He'd always assumed I didn't earn much. Regarding the house choice with Bob, I told him, "I was matching your income level. After all, we agreed to split living expenses. So, if you're calling that a poor lifestyle, doesn't that mean your income isn't that great to begin with?" I made sure to say it plainly. And, to twist the knife further, I added sarcastically, "But, are you happy now that you married Rachel? I heard, you two really did get hitched. Congratulations." The reason this stings is because he must be facing hefty financial demands.
What the hell? I'm not happy at all. And what's this alimony about?
Indeed, I had consulted with a private investigator about Bob even before our divorce. So, after our divorce, I received evidence of him cheating with Rachel. So, I tried claiming compensation for emotional distress. But the tragedy doesn't end there for Bob. Turns out, Rachel had a significant debt, and she was making Bob pay for it. Rachel always attracted a lot of attention, and she was notorious for her affairs. Furthermore, Rachel had previously been through a divorce. The reason for their separation was Rachel's infidelity. Consequently, she had been charged with child support and property division due to that divorce. To cover these payments, Rachel had already accumulated a significant amount of debt. I was, of course, aware of this. Now, the situation is a reflection of Bob's decision to marry such a woman. Moreover, I'll also be claiming child support for the baby I'm carrying. So, with our divorce, Bob now faces a slew of hefty payments and has started a life burdened with debt. When I explained all this, Bob exclaimed,
"Hey, the baby in your belly is mine, right? A child needs a father. Right, Catherine?"
But who was the one who cruelly called me ugly and fat? Now, it's too late for such remarks, and there's no way I'm going to accommodate him. If you need money, why not spread your skills to everyone? You told me, remember? That everyone would benefit from Catherine's expertise. I took that advice and look where I am now. You should do the same. I suggested. It's pretty ironic, really. Because even though he was the one who suggested it, I was the one who acted on his advice, earning a high income. He neglected to notice my growing income and rashly labeled me as poor and then discarded me. Now, he's the one leading a life of poverty. Nowadays, Rachel keeps telling him,
"What's wrong with you? I thought you were a capable man, but you're nothing but common folk. Work harder and earn more money. You're just a man to repay my debts."
Come to think of it, when Rachel asked about Bob in the past, I thought it would be best to speak slightly favorably of him, so maybe I embellished the truth a bit. But all things considered, since both have similar life stories and ended up together, maybe they should just figure things out together. That's what I conveyed before ending the call. Nowadays, Bob is working day and night, juggling his main job and side jobs, trying to repay the massive debt he's incurred. All while Rachel, his wife, doesn't seem to be working earnestly at all. It's a living nightmare. Well, can't be helped. Bob not only abandoned me, but also the child in my womb. It's only fitting as a punishment. On the other hand, a couple of months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. While he's been dealt the card of not having a father, my parents and my workplace's owner have been supportive, and the child is growing up well. The initial months of raising a child meant I couldn't engage in any work-related activities, but fortunately, I had savings. Unexpectedly, even after my temporary retirement, my archived instructional videos kept generating steady income. Thanks to that, my child and I are leading a comfortable life. The land that was in my mother-in-law's name, I've gone ahead and changed it to my name. The eldest son's wife, who had unilaterally changed the deed of the land I inherited from my late husband into her name. It's true that we never got along, but I never expected her to go this far. When I looked to my eldest son for help, there he was, looking at me with a cold gaze. Always picking on my wife, you're the worst, Mom. If you have even a shred of remorse, just graciously hand over the land to my wife and show some sincerity by living out the rest of your life as a maid. My eldest son was taking his wife's side. Let me be clear, I never intended to pick on her. If anything, I was the one being bullied. But in this situation, I didn't think anything I said would get through. I became so fed up with trying to persuade them, I decided to leave, just as the eldest son's wife suggested. So I should be the one to leave, right? I asked to be sure, only to be mocked for not crying and for putting on a brave face. But I wonder who's really putting on a brave face. After I leave, what will become of these two? They probably haven't realized yet. My husband and I were both in our late 50s. We have 2 sons who are both married with their own families, living away from home. So now, it's just the 2 of us, a quiet couple's life. Where we live is the epitome of the countryside that anyone would imagine. Without a car, it's inconvenient to get to the nearest train station, and there's a bus, but it only runs about twice an hour during commute times and doesn't operate on Sundays or holidays. There's a liquor store that doubles as a convenience store, in name only, standing alone at the center of the village. My eldest son despised this rural lifestyle. He wanted to go to a more prosperous high school in the nearby area, but ended up reluctantly attending a local agricultural school because his grades weren't good enough. With that resentment, upon graduating high school, he left home as if fleeing. My eldest son married a woman he met while living in the city he always dreamed of, and he has continued to live there, rarely visiting his childhood home. The eldest son and his wife have returned home a few times for marriage greetings, but other than that, they don't come by at all, nor do they get in touch. Still, they are family, and sometimes there are urgent matters that can't be ignored. In our family, it has been the daughters-in-law who have traditionally handled matters concerning the house. Even without close friendships, it's been that way. So, when I've needed to see my eldest son's wife, I've been the one to make the trip. Because my daughter-in-law really dislikes the countryside. When I visit, she says I bring a country smell and sprays air freshener around me. At first, it bothered me, but now I've learned to let it slide as a trivial matter. Especially because our relationship is already distant, and I didn't want to make it more awkward. Meanwhile, my second son lives in a remote area due to his job. The town where the second son and his wife live isn't much different from the rural town where he grew up. The second son says driving isn't too much of a hassle for him, and he often comes home to check on us, his parents. His wife is a charming woman with a generous nature, and we share similar values, which is why our relationship with her is exceptionally good. Then, while still in my late 50s, my husband passed away unexpectedly. I was engulfed in sorrow. My husband often said that when he passed away first, his only wish was that I wouldn't struggle and would complete the rest of my life without hardship. He said that if the land and house that have been passed down through his ancestors became too much for me to handle or a hindrance in my life, I should prioritize my life over them. In other words, once I inherited them, I could do as I pleased. My husband did talk to our eldest son about inheriting the land and house, a family tradition. But my city-loving eldest son, and especially his wife, vehemently refused, saying, unless it's prime real estate in a major city like New York, inheriting worthless rural land is pointless. So, the eldest son followed her wish and desired something else. The second son also preferred something other than the land and house, so he inherited other assets. I learned later that the second son thought it best for me to inherit the place filled with our memories. The second son and his wife considered moving back and living with me, but they decided against it because it would be too much of a burden on his commute. Still, they've told me warmly not to overdo it on my own, and that if it ever became unavoidable, they would be open to living together at home. I have no intention of sacrificing my sons' lives to be tied down to the land and house. When the time comes, I'll make a clean decision. Thus, I took the land and house, and the sons split the remaining assets evenly. After a while, development began nearby, and the value of the land started to rise. I'm in my 60s now, but I still have plenty of energy and enthusiasm for country life. As the development proceeds, the opinions and feelings about it vary among the people. For me, if a supermarket is built close by, I won't need to drive, and it could help avoid family disputes over issues like giving up driving licenses in old age. Most importantly, if it reduces the worries of my caring second son and his wife, then the development isn't all bad. I'm honestly excited about possibly having a more convenient life. However, I never imagined that my peace would be disrupted by the unexpected actions of my eldest son's wife. As the development progressed and rumors spread about an increase in bus services to the nearest station and the construction of high-rise apartments nearby, my estranged eldest son reached out. He said something along the lines of, "My attempt to make it big in the city has failed, and I've ended up quitting my job. Trying to earn a living in the city was a fleeting dream." I urged him to get to the point. Then he expressed a desire to return and live at home. When I asked him, "So, you want to live together?" he seemed to affirm, but with hesitant phrasing. About a month ago, at my husband's third-year memorial, a family gathering took place. At that time, my eldest son still complained about the countryside odor, so what had changed his mind? In the middle of our conversation, his wife abruptly interjected. "You really live in a lovely place. If it's getting all modern with the land development, you should have said so. Some places have gotten a better view since the mountain trees were cut down. There have been rumors for quite a while that a large shopping mall might go in there." The eldest son's wife didn't care about the countryside property before, thinking it wasn't worth considering, but now that it's developing into a more livable area, she's singing a different tune. The land and house my husband left us are in a very good location. Besides the spot where our house stands, the mountain behind our home is also land I inherited from my husband. There's gonna be land purchases with the development, right? Are you gonna let go of the mountain behind the house? I see, the eldest son and his wife regret not caring for this countryside property before. They can't say they want to inherit the land now, so they're cozying up to me, probably wanting a cut of the money if I sell the mountain. Oh dear, how awful of me. The real issue isn't money, it's about my husband. I listened skeptically to the eldest son's wife's excuses, which seemed quite theatrical. It felt like I was being subjected to a poor speech. To put it simply, it seems true that the eldest son has lost his job and is now unemployed. Their savings are so low they're worried about next month's rent. When I asked about the inheritance split with the younger son, she'd rather not touch that if possible. It's only been since the 3rd anniversary of my husband's death, so she says she wants to be thoughtful about how to use the money he left, but if they're struggling that much, they should use it. I thought. I held back from saying that, as it would likely result in accusations of being cold-hearted. Struggling to pay for rent, gas, and electricity, the eldest son's wife makes a heartfelt appeal, her voice choked with tears. She's asking to move in with me. Live in the countryside? You, who hated the countryside and were adamant about living in the city. I suggested that the eldest son take over, asking if he's going to find a job in the countryside. "Wouldn't you be better off re-employing in the city?" I asked. It was hard to imagine the eldest son, who left for the city as if he was running away from home, accepting a rural life now. The eldest son says he's in a tight spot, soon even eating will become difficult, so he's asking for help. Until the very end, he doesn't clearly say whether he's looking to re-employ in the city or the countryside. So, I set conditions. Moving in is temporary, just until the eldest son finds a new job. I added that he needs to work, even if it's just part-time, while living with us. In this area, with the land development, there's an increase in short-term job postings. I figured he'd get hired if he wasn't too picky. I thought, if I take care of them for about 6 months, they'd save up a decent amount of money and be ready for a fresh start. Marriage is about helping each other out, after all. I assumed the eldest son's wife would also work outside, even if not every day, to help gather funds for their new start. But when we actually started living together, all my plans fell apart. The eldest son was indeed busy looking for work. He searched for jobs during the day and worked as a security guard at construction sites for a few hours in the evening. The eldest son's wife, who had been meek at first, changed her tune as soon as her husband started spending long hours away from home for job hunting and part-time work. Oh, this is such a drag. I can't stand it. Using a pickup for shopping is just too tacky for me. Shopping had become a once-a-week affair, and the convenience of a pickup truck was simply unmatched, unlike the fancy cars you'd see in the city. She was the one who had offered to do the shopping. But after going once, she complained that the pickup was too embarrassing and refused to go again. In front of her husband, she'd praise my cooking and express a desire to learn, but when he wasn't around, she'd do the exact opposite. She couldn't stand the country-style cooking, craving French cuisine instead. She'd complain about mom's home cooking being annoying and then skip her turn to cook. One day, my eldest son's wife said she was gonna cook dinner tonight, so trusting her word, I headed off to tend to the backwoods. Without regular checkups and asking folks to cut down trees, the woods can get wild in no time. It's especially important around the change of seasons and dealing with fallen leaves, and since my husband passed, I've been hiring some young folks from the community to help out. But I can't always leave it to others, so I sometimes go to check on things myself. After making my rounds in the mountains, I came home exhausted in the evening only to find no lights on in the house and the doors locked, leaving me unable to get in. I tried calling my eldest son's wife's cell, but couldn't get through, and was at my wit's end when my son came home. As I was explaining the situation, the eldest son's wife arrived, so I confronted her, asking where she'd been and why she'd locked up. "How could you?" she snapped. "I did just like you told me, went shopping, and you forget what you asked for." She went on to tell my son that I insisted on having some fancy dish for dinner and said if she couldn't serve that dish tonight, she should leave the house. I never said any such thing and didn't even know I'd been left alone. But my son just took his wife's side without question. "Just because we're living together reluctantly doesn't mean you should pick on my wife. She's not used to country living. You can't expect her to find ingredients for some fancy dishes out here in the boonies." He accused me of deliberately making her go out as a form of harassment, even though he knew better. My son and I have always had our differences and have had our fair share of arguments in the past, but this was the first time I was berated so unfairly and one-sidedly. I was looking at my son, and yet he felt like a stranger, which was heartbreaking. I don't demand he take my side. But in the world, husbands tend to have a happier marriage when they side with their wives, and my late husband always stood by me. However, he always made sure to listen to both sides, so we had a good relationship with his mother while she was alive. But my son just yells at me, taking his wife's word over mine. Suddenly he turned surly and said, "Well, that fancy dish you're so keen on? Go ahead and make it yourself and eat all you want. I'm taking my wife out to eat." He snatched the keys from his wife and threw them at me before heading back the way he came. When I entered the house, I saw that my son's wife hadn't done a stitch of housework. It was just as I left it in the morning. I was so upset, I couldn't stop crying. But there was so much to do, it almost seemed a waste to wipe away the tears, so I just got on with the chores while crying. Later, the owner of the only diner around here, where we used to go as a family when the kids were little, came by to see if I was all right. My husband and the diner owner were childhood friends. And I knew my son was aware of his dad's fondness for the place. It turns out my son and his wife had been bad-mouthing me there. The owner said my son's wife was the one filling his head with all this stuff about me. I didn't go into details, just thanked the owner for letting me know. He said to call if I ever needed anything and didn't pry further. Though he looked sad, saying, "Guess people change when they move to the city, huh?" After all this, I decided not to expect anything from my son's wife anymore. If my efforts to get along don't get through, then it's just a waste of time. Better to spend that time and energy getting the chores done myself. I'd be no different from my son's wife if I thought about getting back at her for what she did. As usual, no matter what my son's wife did, I prepared meals for 3 and did the laundry for 3. Whether she thought it was her due or was pleased to have manipulated things in her favor, she continued to act like a guest in the house. Then one day, she came out with something that floored me.
"This property and house that's in your name, I'm in the process of transferring it to my name."
She claimed that she already had all the paperwork ready, flashing the documents at me. But since she didn't show them clearly, it only increased my suspicion about her story. Given my familiarity with such papers from when my husband transferred the property to me, they looked like obvious fakes. When I asked her if they were real, she retorted, "Of course, they are.
From now on, I'm taking over as the head of this household. If you don't want to be kicked out, then show some remorse and apologize for the way you've treated your daughter-in-law as punishment. How about this? Continue to live here as my personal maid. If that doesn't suit you, you're welcome to leave."
Her bold attitude suggested she believed the documents she held were legitimate. I confronted my eldest son, demanding an explanation. "Shouldn't you be the one leaving if you can't keep your promise to live together?" I tried to argue with common sense, but my eldest son retorted that I was the one who broke our promise first.
"It's a shame to be raised by the worst kind of mother who bullies her daughter-in-law. If you feel bad about it, then as a mother, you should just retire and leave everything to your son. Just because we've clashed, doesn't mean you should take it out on my wife out of spite. That's the lowest thing a person can do. Aren't you ashamed, a grown woman acting like this?"
My daughter-in-law managed to convince my son that I was harsh on her because I hated him. Using what she had heard about our differences in values and our incompatible temperaments, my daughter-in-law took advantage of the situation. Given that my relationship with my eldest son was already strained, it was easy for her to make things worse. Realizing that nothing I said to my son now would be believed, I felt that trying to persuade him was a waste of energy. Suddenly, my husband's words crossed my mind. "Fine. I'll consider everything you've said. But I need a week's grace period because I have preparations of my own," I consented. My daughter-in-law was reluctant, but my eldest son agreed. It took exactly 1 week to sort out what belongings to take and to find a new place to move to, among other necessary arrangements. After the agreed week, I left the house. As I was leaving, my daughter-in-law taunted me with a triumphant look, telling me to get out. I didn't respond to her insults and left the house in silence, giving myself a mental fist pump. This was the beginning of my comeback. 1 month later, just as I expected, I received a frantic call from my daughter-in-law. She was in a frenzy because when she tried to cash in by selling the land immediately, she was told it was already in the process of being subdivided and couldn't be sold. "What have you done?" she screamed in a shrill voice that was unbearable, spewing insults like a machine gun. In the midst of local land development, there had been an offer to buy the forested hill behind our house along with the land as a package. The condition was that it had to be sold as a set. It was a welcome offer as managing the hill on my own was challenging. Yet, I still had a desire to live in the house I had shared with my husband a bit longer, so I put the offer on hold. During this time, the issue of our home's deterioration came up. A relative in construction had mentioned concerns about our ancestral home's aging condition when they visited for my husband's memorial service. The house felt too large for just me alone, a sharp contrast to when it felt just right for 3 generations. I couldn't deny a sense of loneliness being left behind in it. Even if I rebuilt the house, my sons probably wouldn't live there anyway. I began to think it might be best to sell it after my husband's 7th death anniversary. The company interested in buying the forest and land told me such developments take years, so there was no rush. However, the start of cohabitation with my eldest son and his wife gradually shifted my plans. Determined not to wait until my husband's 7th memorial, I decided to let go of the house. The company even offered to cover the cost of demolishing the house and clearing the land, which was a relief to me. I couldn't bear the thought of my eldest son's wife, who believed she had a genuine contract, doing as she pleased with the land my husband had left. I refused to give in to her, nor to my eldest son, who followed his wife's words without any doubt. I informed my younger son of everything that had happened and shared my decision. He said he was sad to see the family home go, but reminded me that memories are held in the heart, not in things. Moreover, my younger son and his wife had offered me to live with them. I know there's some anxiety about leaving the familiar place, but this area is pretty rural, too, so I think they'll come to like it. I'm currently living with my second son and his wife, and I'm really happy with their kindness. I just let the first son's wife screaming go in one ear and out the other, and end the call myself at just the right moment, switching to block the incoming calls. Later, my eldest son, having asked around the relatives about where I was, came to the second son's house. He came crying to me for help. Thinking it was too late, I was about to send him back, but then he started telling me how it was all his wife's doing after she kicked me out. It all started when a friend of the first son's wife introduced her to a paralegal. She trusted her friend, so of course, she also believed the paralegal without doubt. She was told she could change the land and house from my name to hers by just giving a thank you fee. Moreover, she was told the fee could be less than half the market rate. Later, when a big sum of money would come in, she thought they could just cover any shortfall from my husband's estate. On the promised day, the friend and the paralegal prepared the transfer documents and handed them over to the first son's wife. She, without any suspicion, believed them to be genuine and handed over the thank you fee. Once the preparations were done, the first son's wife eagerly explained everything to the eldest son when he came back from his part-time job. Exhausted, the eldest son didn't think deeply and trusted his wife's words as the truth. If you think about it, it's a strange story that the wife becomes the homeowner while her husband is still alive, but she convinced him by saying, "It'll be more convenient for your mom if it's in my name." As a fellow housewife, we can have a heart-to-heart and work things out. He foolishly agreed after being told such a plausible story. While the eldest son was out looking for a job and doing part-time work, the first son's wife methodically planned to kick me out, and by brainwashing the eldest son behind my back, she successfully managed to get me out. However, when she triumphantly went to sell the house and land, she was told it was impossible because the land was still being divided and got desperate. She tried to contact the friend and the paralegal, but couldn't reach them. Eventually, their phone got disconnected, and when she contacted the friend's parents' house, she was told they had disowned the criminal and didn't know where she was. That's when she finally learned that her friend had been a repeat fraudster and was a convicted criminal. The first son's wife later found out that many of her former classmates had been victims of this friend. The friend had been introducing former classmates as fake lawyers, accountants, and paralegals, and swindling them out of their service fees. The first son's wife had mentioned the land to her friend, which led to the introduction of the so-called paralegal. Among the victims, some had filed police reports, while others had given up, considering it a costly lesson. Those people could say that because they still had a home, even though they lost money. The eldest son and his wife, having lost money, their home, and the inheritance, had to focus on sorting out the situation before even considering filing a complaint. When I suggested that they should be able to rent an apartment since most of the inheritance should still be there, the eldest son said that the ATM card for the account where the inheritance was deposited had been swapped out with a different card. By the time they realized, all the money had been withdrawn. He came begging, genuinely broke, pleading for help. He explained that the first son's wife had been told that additional charges had arisen because the document preparation had been quite a hassle, and she went to withdraw money with her friend. That's probably when the pin was stolen. I've heard that if you hire a pro to swap cards, you won't even notice it. Driven by immediate greed and lacking attention, the first son's wife had become an easy target after blabbering about the inheritance to her friend. I heard that a little while back, warnings had been circulating from the alma mater of my eldest son's wife. They'd been alerting that a graduate had been repeatedly defrauding classmates and juniors, so be careful with contacts and offers from people you don't usually keep in touch with. But the first son's wife, thinking only idiots fall for scams, ignored the alerts. I turned away from my eldest son and his wife, believing they got what they deserved for being driven by greed. Though the inheritance was gone, I was sure the eldest had some money saved from his part-time job. But that measly part-time pay? Gone with the wind on drink tabs, for sure. Led astray by drinking buddies, his savings from part-time work dwindled to nothing. It's your own fault for not planning ahead. I rebuffed him once more. Just as I was getting troubled by his persistence, my daughter-in-law from my second son came home. Her return, GI slung over her shoulder, radiated such a force that my eldest felt a threat and skedaddled. The second son's wife had recently taken up self-defense as a hobby. When the homeward-bound daughter-in-law from martial arts classes ran into the lingering eldest, he got scared and beat it. Saved by the bell. I thanked my daughter-in-law from my second son for the timely rescue. The eldest son and his wife, having been living as live-in workers at a diner run by a childhood friend of my husband, got booted for continuously griping about the low pay compared to the big city. Do they even know what gratitude is? After that, no one would lend a hand to my eldest son and his wife. They somehow survived until one day, a new house was built on the land where we used to live. Seeing this, my eldest son's wife snapped and broke in. "This is my land and house. It was supposed to be mine." Spouting such nonsense and squatting there led to the police being called and her arrest on the spot. I was contacted by the police as a potential guarantor, but I refused. Then she started her silence, saying she wouldn't talk unless her mother came. The police asked me to help persuade her, but I refused as well. "Your son is asking for help," they relayed, but I felt no obligation to assist, suggesting they might as well lock him up. When the eldest son's wife was arrested, she claimed she had been tricked by a fraud. Apparently, there were a number of similar complaints filed, which made her story seem credible, but that doesn't mean her crimes were erased. She got squeezed for all she was worth, and I heard that the friend and the fake paralegal who committed the fraud are still at large. Even if they are caught, my son was told that the stolen money won't be returned. It seems that he has finally seen the light after the inheritance was not only used without permission but also stolen. The couple divorced, each starting a new path, but my eldest son seems to struggle finding stable work. His ex-wife, having had enough of the countryside, vanished one day after working at a seedy bar back in the city, leaving behind significant debts. I've officially moved in with my second son and his wife. The living arrangement started as a trial due to the ordeal with the eldest son's family. I didn't want to burden my daughter-in-law. But living together turned out great. We say what we want without tension and click well since she's not overbearing. Most importantly, we share the same taste and exchange recipes, making every day enjoyable. The considerate environment we've built doesn't strain us with needless courtesies. Neighbors even mistake my daughter-in-law and me for mother and daughter. That's how well we get along. As my husband would have wished, I'm savoring life with my second son and his family. Looking forward to sharing these stories. I prayed at my husband's grave. Get out of here by today, you old hag. By today.
And get rid of all your stuff. It's just in the way around the house.
Karen made a shooing gesture. As I was getting annoyed, Mike cut in.
Listen. Don't leave a single piece of trash behind.
That was the last straw for me. Sighing, I muttered in response. Okay. Then I turned my back on the two of them. If you get caught cheating, you normally apologize, right? Why are they being so defiant about it? And they're telling me to leave because they want to live together? That's just ridiculous. They keep saying things that suit them, but do they not think I have incriminating evidence against them? Well, if that's the case, I don't mind. They should enjoy themselves while they can. I'll just continue preparing my revenge. I smirked to myself as I headed to my room. My name is Michelle Ogden. I've been married to my husband, Mike, for nearly 20 years. At 48, I'm working from home in design, and Mike, 2 years my senior, is thriving as a system engineer. Our son, Nick, born right after we got married, is now 19 and a respectable college student. You might imagine a happy family hearing this. But in reality, it's not the case. Lately, I've been suspicious of Mike's behavior. On weekends, he sneaks out of the house. Even on weekdays, he comes home pretty late. And when he's at home, he never answers the phone in front of me. It's clear as day he's cheating. If he's cheating, I guess divorce is the only option. Lately, I find myself thinking this more and more. Looking back, Mike's attitude changed a few years ago. It was when Nick was in middle school and our expenses started to pile up. Despite this, Mike's salary was gradually decreasing. When I asked why, Mike said, "The economy's bad, and the company's struggling." There wasn't much I could do. I cut back on our living expenses. But that wasn't enough. So, I thought about getting a job and discussed it with Mike. You know, I'm thinking of getting a part-time job. Huh? We're short on cash? There are Nick's tutoring fees too. I confided in Mike about our financial struggles. Then, suddenly, he started to get angry.
It's because you're wasting money.
I was taken aback by Mike's behavior. Sure, we had argued a few times before. But this was completely different from anything I'd experienced with him. Even though I thought something was off, I retorted. I don't waste money. So, you're just a loser, huh? Everyone's so incompetent. He continued complaining about how everyone at his company couldn't do their jobs right. He even had to help with sales, he grumbled. In the end, I gave up on discussing the matter with him. Then, a former colleague from the company I worked at before our marriage, who had recently started her own business, contacted me asking for help. It had been over a decade since I left that job when I got married. There was a bit of a gap, but I couldn't miss this opportunity. I eagerly accepted her offer. That's how I started working from home in design. Of course, I told Mike about it. But he just said okay. And didn't seem very interested. He barely listened to what I had to say. Nevertheless, I had officially informed him. I continued my work with pride. Then, on a certain weekday, while I was working, Nick unexpectedly came home. "I'm home." "What's up? Why are you home at this time?" It was just past noon. At that time, Nick was in middle school. He should have had classes until the evening and then club activities. There was no way he should be home at this hour. Didn't I tell you today's the start of midterms? I suddenly remembered. Looking at the calendar, it indeed had tests written on it. I forgot. I'll get lunch ready right away. I hurried to prepare Nick's lunch. Then, from behind, Nick asked, "Mom, were you working?" "Huh? Your laptop is out, and there are all these documents." Nick was pointing at my work documents and laptop I had left on the living room table. "Oh, sorry. I'll clean it up right away." "No, it's okay, you can do it later. But there's something I want to talk to you about." Nick ran to his room. And soon returned with his tablet. "I'm making a game. I want to be an engineer like Dad." Nick showed me the game he had been creating on his tablet. It wasn't as polished as commercial games, but it was impressive nonetheless.
That's amazing.
I want to go to a vocational school. Do you think Dad would agree? If you show him this, I'm sure he'll support you. I wholeheartedly supported Nick. But our hopes were soon shattered. When Mike saw Nick's game, he harshly criticized it. This is a joke, right? But no, it's totally useless. I could make this in 10 minutes. Mike laughed mockingly. I was furious at his reaction. To a system engineer like Mike, Nick's game might seem like child's play. Offering professional advice is one thing, but mocking it is unacceptable. As I was about to complain, Mike continued to Nick.
If you have time to play around like this, you should be studying more. Think before you speak.
When I interjected, Mike got annoyed.
What? You have a problem with my parenting? Yes, I do. You should respect our son's independence more. Huh? Usually, it's the wife's job to educate the kids. If you did your job right, we wouldn't be having this issue.
Mike raised his voice. I clammed up in the moment. It was useless arguing with him. I had to help Nick myself. In the end, I just listened to Mike's complaints in silence. I waited for his anger to subside. The next day, when Mike was not around, I said to Nick, "Nick, I'll buy you a computer for your game development studies."
Really?
Yes. If your dad says anything, I'll say it's for my work. With this, I bought an expensive desktop computer for Nick, paying for it myself. Mike looked skeptical, but I asserted it was for my work. This incident gradually strained the relationship between Mike and me. I've been contemplating divorce. But it's not easy to bring it up because of Nick. These days, I've been feeling quite unsettled. On the other hand, Nick went off to college. He said he wanted to study his specialty in college and thought his dad wouldn't object. Nick had grown up to be quite clever. Maybe I can manage even if we get divorced. As I was thinking this, Nick came home from college one day.
Mom, listen.
What's up, Nick? I stopped my work and looked up. Nick's face was noticeably pale. I felt anxious about what might have happened. Finally, Nick hesitantly began to speak.
I saw Dad cheating.
Dad's cheating? When I asked for clarification, Nick elaborated. Nick's story went like this. He was heading to a lecture at college earlier. But then a friend informed him the class was cancelled. So they decided to hang out downtown. That's when he saw Mike walking arm in arm with a young woman. Nick pretended not to notice because his friends were there. But he couldn't bear it and came home.
I'm sorry. If it weren't for my friends, I would have confronted him on the spot.
That would have been tough. I understood Nick's difficulty. Putting that aside, I was already aware of Mike's infidelity. Reflecting on it, Mike had been acting oddly recently. He leaves early on weekends and comes home late on weekdays. He talks on the phone secretly when he's at home. It was impossible not to suspect something. That's why I had already requested an investigation into Mike's behavior. I already had the results. When I told this to Nick, he looked surprised and asked me, "So you were calm about it? Are you gonna divorce?" Well, the investigation results were positive, so probably. Okay. If that's your decision, I won't say anything. That made things easier. I intended to confront Mike when he came home that night. But he didn't return. He must have realized Nick had seen him. Mike finally came back the following Sunday, bringing an unfamiliar young woman with him. So this is the mistress. As I was thinking, the woman introduced herself. "Hello, I'm Karen. I've been dating Mike." Her insincere greeting infuriated me. Mike then spoke to me. "So, I'm gonna live with Karen. We're getting a divorce, so please leave." "What's the reason?"
A smart guy like me deserves a young girl, not an old lady like you.
Mike smirked. I couldn't believe his audacity but calmly responded, Oh really? That's exactly what I wanted. I replied with sarcasm. Then Karen, looking irritated, pointed at me. An old lady like you acting all high and mighty? Think you can live alone? Unfortunately for you, I work, so I'll be fine.
Then let's get divorced quickly.
Karen took a divorce form from her pocket and tossed it at my feet. I'll make sure to get alimony from both of you. Karen frowned in displeasure at my words. Meanwhile, Mike was grinning, waiting. I signed the divorce papers and handed them to Mike. At that moment, Karen said triumphantly, "Get out by today, you old hag. By today.
And get rid of all your stuff. It's just in the way around the house."
Karen made a shooing gesture. As I grew angry, Mike cut in.
"Make sure not to leave a single piece of trash behind."
That was the final straw. I sighed and muttered in response. Okay. Then I turned my back on the two of them. When caught cheating, people normally apologize, right? Why are they being so defiant? And telling me to leave because they want to live together? That's just ridiculous. They've always said things that suit them, but do they not think I hold incriminating evidence? Well, if that's how it is, I don't mind. They better enjoy themselves while they can. I'll keep preparing my revenge. Smirking, I headed to my room. Before packing my belongings, I called the junk removal service. After arranging for them to collect the junk, I started packing. After a while, Nick returned home. I could hear Mike and Nick talking in the living room. But soon they started arguing.
"It's because Dad cheated. Shouldn't you apologize to Mom first?" "Shut up. It's none of your business."
After their conversation died down, it became quiet. Peeking into the living room, I saw only Nick. "Nick? Where's your dad?"
"They left on a trip together. They're ridiculous."
Nick stamped his foot. I felt relieved. With Mike gone, I could do as I pleased. Now was my chance for revenge. I smiled at Nick and said, "Nick, I'm divorcing and moving out, will you come with me?" "Of course." Then start preparing for the move. And also, I shared a plan with Nick. Hearing it, he willingly started packing. Soon, the junk removal guys arrived. I led them inside the house. Dispose of everything in these 2 rooms, the furniture and appliances. Everything? Even the new stuff? Yes. I'll buy new ones after moving. I asked them to dispose of the furniture and appliances in my room and Nick's. But not in the living room. Those were shared property with Mike. I didn't want to deal with complaints for disposing of them without permission. Anyway, I had them dispose of my things and those I bought. He'll regret it. Later that evening, I left the house. I entrusted my belongings to a moving company. I hadn't decided where to move yet, so I asked them to keep my stuff for a while. Nick and I moved to a nearby hotel. We planned to stay there temporarily. A few days later, during breakfast, Mike called. "Hello? What's up?"
"What do you mean, what's up? Did you really throw away the furniture and appliances?"
Huh? Of course. It was your idea, wasn't it? As I snapped back, Mike suddenly became tongue-tied, mumbling something indistinct. I scolded him. "You said to throw them away. Don't complain now." "Well, that's true, but..." He sounded hesitant. Of course, he needed that thing. I knew what Mike was searching for, and had deliberately said everything was disposed of. As I thought this, Mike started to grovel. "Which company did you use for disposal? Why does that matter?" "Well, I'm looking for something." I smirked to myself, thinking, just as I suspected. Then, I asked him, feigning innocence. "Looking for something? The fridge, washing machine, and TV are all there, aren't they? Your stuff is untouched." "No, not that, it's about a computer." Just as I thought. Mike was looking for the computer I bought for Nick. I hinted at it. A computer? I bought that for Nick. It's mine too, so I plan to dispose of it.
You haven't disposed of it yet?
His voice suddenly rose. Caught in my trap, I continued. Yes. I thought selling it on a marketplace app would be better.
Please, give me back that computer.
Huh? It's mine. Why should I give it back? Mike was speechless. But this wasn't satisfying enough for revenge. So, I made a proposition. How about this? Will you buy it from me? Buy it? Yes. I was planning to sell it anyway, so I'll sell it to you. Mike's voice brightened. Okay. It's used, so how about $1,000? What? That's too low. Let's say $20,000. What? That's a rip-off. His voice grew louder in irritation. You don't have to buy it. Why do you want a used computer anyway? When I asked, Mike began to panic. Well, that's just. You could just buy a new computer, I suggested.
Fine. I'll pay $20,000 for it. Sell it to me.
Thrilled inside, I informed Mike that we had a deal. Later, Mike insisted on receiving the computer immediately, but I had left it with the movers. So, I told him he'd have to wait until I settled into my new place. Despite his complaints, Mike reluctantly agreed. A few days later, I finally found a new place. With Nick's help, I moved into my new home. Right after that, Mike transferred the payment for the computer. I handed the money to Nick. Nick, use this money to start living on your own. I said, seeing it as a perfect opportunity. Nick began living alone in an apartment near his college. I eventually sent the computer to Mike's house. But I removed the external disk first. Then, I sent that disk to Mike's company, along with a letter to his boss. Soon after, I received a call from Mike's boss and was asked to visit his company on a specified day. At Mike's company, I announced my name at the reception and waited. A man slightly older than me appeared. Hello. I'm Smith, the department head. Are you Mrs. Ogden, the one who sent the letter? Yes, thank you for your time. Please come to my office, he said, leading the way. We reached his office, where a somber-looking Mike was seated on a sofa. Michelle. Why are you here? Mike exclaimed, standing up suddenly. I'm here for my revenge, I said, smiling, as Mike turned pale. Mr. Smith then intervened. Let's begin our discussion, he suggested, changing Mike's expression. Mike sat down, sweating, as Mr. Smith placed the external disk I sent on the table. First, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Ogden, what's this about? Mr. Smith asked, placing the external disk of the computer on the table. It was the one I had sent to him. Meanwhile, Mike quickly averted his gaze. I don't know what this is about. But this was sent by your ex-wife. Moreover, it contains our company's client data? Mr. Smith gave Mike a stern look. Mike began to stammer out an excuse. It must have gotten mixed in by accident. Our company strictly prohibits taking client data off-site. That's a mistake, Mike should just tell the truth. I was inwardly laughing. This was a little before Mike and I got divorced. He had been acting strangely. One day, when I returned from shopping, Mike was inexplicably sitting in front of Nick's computer, in the living room. Of course, the pretense was that I used it. But there was no reason for Mike to use it, since he had his own computer in his room. Curious, I covertly watched him. He did something on it and then turned it off. I pretended not to notice and checked the computer's contents the next afternoon. There were unfamiliar data files written on the external disk. Looking inside, it was some kind of database. I had a sudden realization. Mike took company data home, using someone else's computer as a hiding place. How low, I thought. Shortly thereafter, we got divorced, and I took the computer with me. Did Mike not expect me to dispose of it? Maybe he thought I would leave it behind since Nick was using it. Regardless, Mike must be regretting it now. Looking at him, he seemed about to cry. What's going on? Speak clearly. I'm sorry. Mike finally admitted his guilt. Afterward, Mr. Smith scolded Mike severely. Then Mr. Smith said, "Taking company data is a theft crime or a violation of the Unfair Competition Prevention Act."
What? No way.
I'm going to press charges. As soon as Mr. Smith said this, Mike burst into tears. He apologized to Mr. Smith.
I'm so sorry. Please forgive me.
No way. You'll face both criminal and civil responsibilities. But, oh no. Mike broke down crying. Watching Mike crumble in tears, I couldn't stop laughing inside. That's what you get for doing strange things. Serves you right. I was thinking about getting revenge for the infidelity when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Then a woman's voice. Did you call, Mr. Smith? Ah, yes, come in. I recognized that voice. As I was thinking, the door opened. Excuse me.
Ah!
I exclaimed as the woman entered. At the same time, she looked at me. Then she shouted.
Ha! Why are you here?
It was Karen who raised her voice. It's complicated.
Shut up. This is no place for an old lady like you.
She then quickly covered her mouth. Noticing Mr. Smith's red face. Mr. Smith, clenching his jaw, gestured for Karen to sit down. She quietly sat where Mike had been. Once she was seated, Mr. Smith asked her. So, Karen, I have a question. You're planning to start your own business, right? Yes. In the same field as our company? Mr. Smith looked at her sternly. Feeling pressured, Karen answered hesitantly. Mr. Smith's conversation then reached a critical point. You're also in charge of managing customer data, right? Is everything okay on your end? Mr. Smith asked Karen.
What do you mean?
Karen was sweating profusely. At that moment, I realized something. These two were in cahoots. They planned to take out the customer data together. In essence, here's what was happening. Mike and Karen both extracted customer data from their respective companies. Karen was to start her own business first, using that data. And then Mike would join her to run the business together. Once I understood their plan, it wasn't interesting anymore. Just trying to succeed using others' efforts. How pathetic. I sighed. Meanwhile, the conversation continued. Mr. Smith was pressing Karen. I had my subordinates investigate, and it seems there has also been a data leak. Looks like you were involved, weren't you? Karen looked down. But then raised her head to start making excuses.
No, it's not true. This is all because of Mr. Ogden.
As she started to blame Mike, he got angry. He stood up and began complaining to Karen. Blaming me? You were the one who started this.
I don't know anything about that. You did this on your own.
What?
You said you wanted to marry me so.
I was disgusted by their petty excuses. I took out a document from my bag, placed it on the table, and addressed Mike and Karen, who were bickering. This is the result of your affair investigation. By the way, your girlfriend here has another boyfriend.
What?
Mike hurriedly grabbed the document on the table, which included a photo of Karen holding hands with another man.
Karen, what's this about? That's none of your business. Shut up. You tricked me.
Mike raised his voice. I couldn't help but comment on their ugly scene.
Younger men are obviously better than old guys like you.
Mike suddenly became quiet, perhaps recalling what he had said to me earlier. Well, anyway, you'll both have to take responsibility, Mr. Smith interjected.
Wait a minute. This is a crime. Save your excuses for the police station." With Mr. Smith's stern words, Karen was left speechless. Afterward, the company pressed charges against Mike and Karen. They were soon arrested for theft and other charges. Additionally, the company filed a civil lawsuit for damages against them. Naturally, Karen's plan to start her own business was ruined. Her boyfriend apparently left her too. Now, both charged with theft and violations of the Unfair Competition Prevention Act, they're busy making excuses in court. But I doubt their excuses will hold up. The outcome of the trial will be interesting to watch. Even if they end up with a fine, I doubt they'll be able to pay it. I'm glad I got my alimony before all this happened. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying living alone. My design work is going well, and my income is stable. It seems Nick has a girlfriend now, and I'm looking forward to many exciting things. Maybe I'll have grandchildren causing a ruckus soon, but for now, I'm enjoying the quiet life. My name's Emily, a regular 26-year-old office worker. I'm average in looks, intelligence, and personality, with maybe a bit of a strong will if anything. That's how I introduced myself as the group date began. It was organized by some women from the department next to mine, with guys from a slightly larger company than ours. It was supposed to be 4-on-4, but I was invited to even out the numbers when someone dropped out. I'm not stunningly beautiful, but not ugly enough to kill the mood either. Just good enough at reading the room for a group date. I'm single right now and didn't really expect to find someone special here. The venue was a casual Italian restaurant, so I joined with my appetite as the priority. As soon as the date started, it was clear that the other 3 women were targeting 2 guys who were tall and somewhat resembled Korean pop stars. The other 2 men were a plain-looking guy with glasses and a big, muscular guy. The muscular man sitting in front of me introduced himself as Ryan. I could tell from his well-developed pectorals and biceps, even under his shirt, and his thick beard. He was totally my type. You see, I've always liked strong, muscular men, not the slender, handsome types. Like rugby players, for example. Perfect. He doesn't have to ride on a white horse. In fact, I'd prefer a man who could carry the horse himself. That's also why I'm often invited to these dates. My tastes rarely overlap with the other women. Wow, impressive muscles. Do you play any sports? I started the conversation. I used to play rugby in college. Now, it's mostly just gym workouts. Bingo. I thought to myself. Ryan, like me, joined the date focusing more on food. He didn't actively engage in conversation with the women and just enjoyed the delicious food. I admired the way he ate. You're Emily, right? Do you play any sports? Ryan joined in the conversation. Can you tell? I'm also into working out. Ah, I thought so. You're in great shape. Oops, that's probably not the right way to say it. Ryan said with a bright laugh. His laugh and voice were just my type. We hit it off, talking about working out, our gyms, and muscles. The other participants seemed a bit taken aback, but we didn't mind. Ryan and I exchanged numbers and agreed to work out together sometime. It seems that the only couple who got together at the mixer that day was Ryan and me. Ryan is a year older than me, at 27. He's quite tall and muscular, standing at 6 feet 1 inch and weighing 198 pounds, while I'm 5 feet 5 inches and weigh 125 pounds. Many tall men prefer petite and delicate women, but Ryan wasn't like that. He seemed genuinely happy that we shared a passion for working out. In this way, Ryan and I, who met under such circumstances, not only went on workout dates but also went to movies and had meals together, just like any other couple. We got to the point where we'd casually talk about stuff like, you know, when I get married, I want to have a workout machine in the living room, and I'd reply, then we'll need to rent a place with a spacious living room. When I introduced Ryan to my family, they instantly liked him. His charm and thoughtfulness made it seem like our wedding was just around the corner. Next week, I'm visiting Ryan's home. He lost his mother when he was young and was raised by his sister,
who is 7 years older than him. I thought of her as a potential challenging sister-in-law, but less intimidating than a mother-in-law. When I arrived, a bit nervous, I was greeted by Ryan's stunningly beautiful sister, Layla. Layla, being 7 years older than me, would be in her mid-30s, but she's so stunningly beautiful that even I, a woman, can't help but be mesmerized by her. She has a softer, more refined version of Ryan's face, about the same height as me, but so slender that I wonder if she has any muscles at all, and her waist-length black hair is gorgeous. Ryan's dad is a sturdy man with thick eyebrows, just like Ryan. Layla entertained us with homemade lavish scattered sushi, but that's when a problem arose. I'm allergic to shellfish.
Sorry, Layla. I'm allergic to crabs and shrimps.
I won't get a severe reaction unless I eat a lot, but I definitely can't eat the generous amount of shrimps and crabs on top of the sushi.
Huh? Didn't I tell you, sis?
Ryan knew about my allergy since we've had several dining dates.
Nope, I didn't hear about it.
Sorry, Emily.
It's okay. Ryan, can you take these crabs and shrimps?
When I said that, Ryan replied with an enthusiastic "Oh." Gladly, and picked the crabs and shrimps from my dish with chopsticks, transferring them to his own. At that moment, I felt Layla's gaze intensify, but I didn't pay much attention to it.
From now on, I'll be more careful. But if you marry Emily, Ryan, you won't be able to eat crab or shrimp anymore.
When Layla said that, it dawned on me that I probably wouldn't willingly use ingredients I'm allergic to. Feeling a bit guilty, Layla added as if to rub it in.
Such a shame, you love them so much.
Huh? Was she blaming me? I was taken aback, but then Ryan said, "It's all good, all good. I can eat crab and shrimp when we go out. Heck, I can come here to eat them." His cheerful response was a relief. While I was excusing myself, Layla kept saying things like Ryan has loved crab and shrimp since he was a kid, and as long as I'm here to make them, I'll make a lot for you, which made me realize that I wasn't exactly welcomed. Moreover, as we were leaving and Ryan headed to the front door, Layla followed, saying even after you get married, you're always welcome here, really. Maybe she thought I was taking him away from her.
Ryan. I don't think your sister thinks very highly of me. I had no idea you loved crab and shrimp so much.
As I said this dejectedly, Ryan comforted me.
Well, yeah, I like crab and shrimp, but you don't need to worry about my sister too much. She's a bit overprotective, you know. She's been saying that cooking for me is her life ever since our mom passed away.
I wondered if that was just a mild case of overprotectiveness. After all, she had been like a mother to him since they lost their mom, so maybe she was a supercharged version of a mother-in-law. But Layla has this really handsome boyfriend. He's beyond movie star handsome, the kind that makes almost any woman's heart flutter. Not that I find him all that great. Her boyfriend, Hendrik, is 33 and runs a nightclub. Back when Layla used to work, she was dragged to his nightclub by a female colleague. Hendrik fell for Layla and then decided to strike out on his own and become a business owner. Ryan said, Hendrik is totally smitten with Layla. Even Dad, who was initially against it, seems to have come around, saying it's okay because he's not just an employee, but a business owner. We even work out together. He says he wants to put on a moderate amount of muscle. Layla, Hendrik, Ryan, and I have had dinner together before. Once, when I was about to put lemon and sauce on Ryan's fried shrimp, Layla sharply said,
"Hey! Ryan eats his fried food with soy sauce."
Ryan, trying to smooth things over, said, "Oh, it's fine." Emily suggested trying lemon and sauce, and it turned out to be tasty. I can go with soy sauce or tartar sauce, but lately, I prefer lemon and sauce. Despite his efforts, Layla seemed displeased. Scenes like this happened more than once. Layla would make a face whenever topics like Ryan enjoying foreign dramas influenced by me or his changing taste in clothes came up. Then there were some slightly odd occurrences. Whenever we had a meal at Ryan's house, I often ended up with allergic hives. Of course, since that incident, I've never visibly seen crab or shrimp in the dishes. However, if the dishes contained crushed or mixed crab or shrimp extracts, I wouldn't notice. Thinking this couldn't be a coincidence, I offered to help with the cooking, given that I'm more than just a guest, but Layla stubbornly refused. Then, Emily, you can help with the dishes, she said, but she hovered so close that I couldn't check anything. So, casually, I mentioned, I got hives again after dining here the other day, to which she replied, that's strange. I didn't use any crab or shrimp. Emily, do you have other allergies? Her tone almost made it sound like it was my fault. Furthermore, she said, with so many allergies, it'll be tough cooking for Ryan if you live together. I'm worried about him, focusing entirely on Ryan's needs, not mine. For the record, I don't have any other allergies. I've had tests done. Even when I told her this, Layla wouldn't believe me. I realized then that it wasn't about me being unsuitable or disliked, it was that Layla didn't want Ryan to drift away from her. But Layla is 35 years old. She can't stay overprotective forever. Luckily, she has Hendrik, who is head over heels for her. Maybe he could help sort things out. Hey, aren't Layla and Hendrik getting married? I thought they'd be first in line, I asked Ryan. You'd think so, right? I've said that many times, but she claims she can't think about it until I'm married and settled, he replied. Ryan said that, but it seemed like Layla herself was the one hindering their marriage. Then, an incident happened. We were dining out, the four of us, invited by Layla and Hendrik. When Ryan got up to go to the bathroom, Layla followed shortly after, saying, I'll be right back. Soon, she returned, being almost carried by Ryan. I'm sorry, I feel a bit unwell, she said, holding a handkerchief to her mouth and looking pained. Hendrik stood up, offering, Are you okay? I'll take you home, but Layla declined, saying, No, it's fine. We ordered a set menu, so you two will enjoy it. Ryan will take me home, and left with Ryan. Left behind, Hendrik and I felt a bit awkward, but the French course meal was waiting. I decided to prioritize my appetite and enjoy the meal. Hendrik just stared at me and said, Emily, you're different. You're very fresh and attractive. With the kind of flattery you'd expect. Sure enough, he's good at complimenting women. I was impressed. But that wasn't all. To my surprise, Hendrik lightly held my hand and whispered in my ear, Hey, how about we have some fun together? No. What's he thinking, especially after his girlfriend, who's sick, just went home? Isn't he totally into his sister, Layla? So what if he's super handsome? Does he think anyone would fall for being gazed at and having their hand held like this? All these thoughts raced through my mind at lightning speed. Come on. Even as a joke, stop it. Layla would get mad if she knew, right? I tried to brush it off, but Hendrik's response was unexpected. He gave a meaningful smile and said, She won't get mad. I have zero interest in handsome men, just so you know, I made my rejection clear. Hendrik then said, I see. That's interesting, Emily, and laughed, not seeming offended at all. I shook off Hendrik's offer to take me home and quickly headed to the station to call Ryan. I really wanted to see Ryan. What's up? Why call me out here? I called Ryan to a karaoke box near the station. It was the only place I could think of where we could be alone. Sorry. Oh, how's Layla feeling? To be honest, I wasn't really worried. She perked right up as soon as she got home. Such a drama queen. We missed out on eating that rare French meal. As Ryan sighed, I dropped a bombshell. I got asked out by Hendrik after you left. Ryan's face turned serious as he said, What? Why? But Hendrik is so into Layla. Right. So I told him Layla would get mad, but he said she wouldn't. What does that mean? No way. But then again. Ryan murmured, trying to recall something. What he told me next was unbelievable. He dated several women, but they all dumped him after meeting Layla. They all said they found someone else. I've seen those ex-girlfriends walking arm in arm with a guy who looks a lot like Hendrik.
I thought it was just someone who looked similar.
I was horrified. Was Hendrik being asked by Layla to break up Ryan's relationships by seducing his girlfriends? This was no laughing matter. I never mentioned it to Ryan, but I told him clearly now. After eating Layla's cooking, I often got hives. Despite not being allergic to anything but shellfish.
I get Layla not wanting to let go of you, Ryan, but this isn't good for any of us.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, Emily, for dragging you into this mess. I can't believe Layla would go that far. Ryan seemed really shaken, but my future was at stake too. If you choose Layla, I won't see you anymore, I said firmly. Ryan also spoke decisively. I choose you, Emily. Let's deal with Layla together. If I leave that house, she can't do anything more. And he added, feelingly, I'm just glad you're not into handsome men. I thought it was all my fault I kept getting dumped. I felt sorry for him but couldn't help smiling a little. This strengthened our bond, and we started planning for marriage. After that day, I stopped visiting Ryan's house. I was making smooth progress with the wedding preparations, but it's not like I wasn't nervous. Just a quick search online and you'll find tons of horror stories about things going wrong at weddings and receptions. It's unlikely, but better safe than sorry. I asked the planner, do problems often happen on the wedding day? And she quickly picked up on my anxiety, asking, is there something you're worried about? So, I was able to open up and discuss my concerns. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. Hoping that everything would go smoothly, I entered the dressing room only to be met with a shocking sight. There was Ryan's sister, tearing a wedding dress to shreds with a large cutter knife. Trampled accessories lay scattered at her feet. I had anticipated some interference. Like spilling water or coffee on the dress. But cutting it with a cutter? I hadn't expected that. It's all ruined now, she said with a smile on her beautiful face.
But you do know that's all rented, right?
Of course, it is. Unless you're incredibly wealthy, you don't custom make wedding dresses. Her beautiful smile twisted slightly.
What? But you can't have a wedding without a dress. Well, I anticipated something like this and had reserved 2 dresses. I preferred the other dress, but it can't be helped,
I said as calmly as I could. Then Ryan knocked and entered the dressing room. He grasped the situation immediately and stammered, Sister, what have you done? The planner with us said, those dresses and accessories belong to our venue. Should I report this as property damage? I'll pay for everything. I don't want to make a criminal out of a family member on my wedding day, Ryan said. Hearing the word criminal from Ryan's mouth, his sister finally seemed to grasp the situation, screaming, Criminal? I'm just opposed to this marriage. Layla.
Unfortunately, we're already legally married. Even if we cancel today's ceremony, we are still husband and wife.
Hearing this, his sister froze, then collapsed, muttering, No. I didn't know, it can't be. Ryan then added,
Please, sister. Don't make me hate you more than I already do.
At his words, she broke down, crying loudly like a child. Ryan. While his sister continued crying, Ryan escorted her out of the room, and I hurriedly finished my makeup and put on the spare dress. By then, my family and Ryan's father had arrived at the venue. Hendrik also showed up, saying, she really did it. I wondered why he hadn't stopped her if he saw it coming, but then again, he was part of the scheme, so of course, he wouldn't. Well, nobody could have stopped her anyway. After handing over Layla, who kept crying, to Hendrik, Ryan and I explained the situation to our parents. Everyone was a bit panicked, but since we were calm, we all agreed, let's just get through today's wedding and reception. Throughout the wedding, his sister continued to cry, and during the reception, she kept a handkerchief to her eyes. To those unaware of the situation, it seemed like she was just sad about her brother getting married. After the wedding and reception went off without a hitch, Ryan and I stayed overnight at a hotel in New York and then left for our honeymoon. A week-long trip to Italy. Planning to eat our way through it. For Layla, Ryan's words, please don't make me dislike you any more than this, must have been the greatest punishment of all. 3 months later, Hendrik showed up at our new home, holding a large bouquet of flowers. Ryan hadn't been home since moving out. He hadn't met his sister since then. She had called occasionally, but he coldly dismissed her. Still, Ryan seemed concerned and asked Hendrik about his sister-in-law's condition, to which he received an unexpected reply. "Yeah, I've been thinking about breaking up."
What?
Hendrik was so deeply in love that he did such a thing at her request? As I was surprised, he said, "She's become like an empty shell since then. She's not the girl I fell for anymore." I loved how she was so passionate and tried hard for Ryan. It was a somewhat understandable yet confusing reason. But I wanted Hendrik to stay by her side. If he didn't, who knows when she might cause us trouble again.
"So, why don't you get married and have kids? If a boy who looks like Ryan is born, she'll probably get obsessed and try hard again."
I admit, I can be quite a nasty woman. Totally calculating. But I absolutely want to protect my current life. Because right now, I'm pregnant, and if the child born resembles Ryan, I can't shake off this anxiety. Hendrik, surprisingly upbeat, responded to my rash suggestion, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I've never considered marriage before, but I'll think about it. Thanks." And just like that, a month later, they registered their marriage. His enthusiasm and decisiveness are extraordinary. The boy who came to Ryan and me looked just like me. Maybe Layla won't pay him any mind, I thought. I never liked kids much, but my own child is exceptionally cute. Now I can somewhat understand why his sister was so fixated on Ryan. "Emily, don't become like my sister," Ryan said with a slightly sad and complex expression. As for his sister and her husband, they quickly got pregnant and had a baby as planned. The baby, born to a stunningly beautiful couple, Hendrik and Layla, wasn't a boy resembling Ryan but a precious little girl. Unexpectedly, it was Hendrik who became utterly smitten with his daughter. He sends us pictures of her, growing cuter by the day, without us asking. Their little angel, who just turned 1, is becoming more adorable. In contrast, our mischievous 2-year-old son is like a little monster, but that's what makes him so lovable. Hendrik often says things like, "I'm never letting her get married. If she gets a boyfriend, I'll do whatever it takes to drive him away." In a way, they're a couple cut from the same cloth. So, it seems like they constantly argue about their daughter, but frankly, it's none of my business. I do wonder why all the photos he sends are only of his daughter and not a family portrait, but again, that's not my concern. Because in 2 months, I'm due to give birth. Twins. And with a mischievous little monster already taking up so much of my time, I can't afford to worry about other families. We rented a spacious living room and installed a training machine, but now Ryan's the only one using it. I plan to use it to get rid of my post-pregnancy weight, but I often find it covered with laundry. Running around with kids requires strength and stamina. I'm glad I've been working out.
If we have more kids, it might be dangerous. We should put away the machine and go to the gym together.
But hey, even without the machine, we can still work out, said Ryan, doing squats while carrying our son on his back. I love Ryan for saying things like that. So I'm pretty sure I won't become like his sister. I want our children to experience the happiness of living with a wonderful partner, just like me.